This is a video that I've been expecting to make for a few days, and it's finally happened. Final Fantasy 16 is getting user score reviewed bombed, as expected. And why is this expected? Well, it's the age of the internet, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. Whether you're liking the game or not, this has been a weird tool that gamers have taken advantage of to use to voice their either disappointment or to try and join in some kind of community, some kind of mob, or this could also be various different bots. One way or the other, Final Fantasy 16 has proven itself from a quality and a gameplay perspective. I know I've been absolutely enjoying this game, but I'm going to try to put my bias aside and I'm going to give you guys what people are saying, and then I'm going to discuss that in today's video. So hello everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Brian if you're new around here, but if you're a returning subscriber, you're freaking awesome. Thanks for coming back, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts, especially on this video as well. But it's to note, this video will not include any spoilers for the game, so if you have yet to play Final Fantasy 16, we're not going to talk about its story, but we're going to talk about the problems that exist within the culture of gaming right now, and how I think we're being kind of on a way used, abused, and manipulated by social media. Now, all that being said, let's bring it up. A user score right now of 6.9. Now, the review scores of coming in at 88, which I honestly feel at this moment is a little bit low. I'm very excited to see everything that the game has to offer. I'm roughly about 10-ish plus hours into the campaign, and absolutely couldn't be more pleased with like every aspect. I have a hard time naming what my favorite aspect is. Is it the combat? Is it the voice acting? Is it the characters? Is it the story? Is it the world? Like, there's just so many good things. They're all just, I think, so well done. Now, typically in the past, when we have the review score, that 6.9, or even the Metacritic score, companies have had their employees' bonuses related to a Metacritic score. In Final Fantasy 14, Yoshi P took that away. Not the bonuses, but the Metacritic score connection. And I think that's really important because at the end of the day, I don't think you're hurting a company when you're doing a review bomb. We'll talk about some perspectives of where people feel review bombing is necessary here in a second. But when you're looking at a review score of 6.9, when you're doing these kind of things, like outside of Square Enix, and hopefully this is the case with 16, you're more or less hurting the guys, the people who worked hard to build it. You're not necessarily hurting games or game sales, because just like any force, one way or the other, an equal but opposite force will rise up. It's almost a written law of the internet. More people will go out and purchase the game than anything else. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that's some people's strategies, or maybe they're just overall frustrated, but we've seen that build up as Final Fantasy 16 got closer and closer to launch. Just to pull up one review here, Gamerboy says, another game boosted by gaming media. You know why? Because they were afraid that if they don't give good reviews to Sony, they won't get review codes, and Sony will not let them get their hands on the games early. So listen carefully. Here's a non-biased review from a person not afraid of Sony. This is not optimized well. Falls below 30 frames per second during battle. Battles are too easy. You only need 2 buttons to kill bosses. Now, what's interesting about this is we're seeing this narrative, and we'll talk about the accessibility options here in a second. So then the story is messy and weird, rated M for clout, nothing but sure about this game. Very curious what they mean by that. Only good thing about it is the main character looks good. Side quests are meh. If I'm going to rate this, I like a game trying hard to be Xenoblade Chronicles but fails miserably. Disappointed with Square Enix for this game and disappointed with the biased media. Now, there is some truth in this. How the best way to lie to somebody is to give them a nugget of truth, something that they believe to be true or something that is true, and then essentially you bundle it together. We see this happening a lot, especially when it comes to social media, to clout farmers, to anyone. We can name somebody. I'm not, because that's going to send the comment section down a black and dark hole as my voice cracks because of puberty, and we don't need to necessarily kind of relitigate that BS here in this video. But what they get right though is, yeah, there is a quid pro quo. There we go. In games media, games journalism, in my mind, has long since been dead. And just because I'm sitting here talking about it doesn't mean that as a human being that I'm not capable of failing you. But at this point in time, like I've seen the dark underbelly of the world of games media, of people afraid to tell people what is going on because they don't want to lose access to those review codes or those plane trips and things like that. And that's really fundamentally disappointing. I think that in order to truly, and this is just my personal belief, you can disagree, to bring in a level of just extreme truthfulness, it doesn't mean that I'm a fanboy of Square Enix, right? Like, I love the games that they produce, but like, it's important that y'all know that. However, Square Enix doesn't pay me for these things. I don't go on these trips. They don't pay for these, like going out to the media tour. That was something that I paid for. Like, all of these things, just so that way I can still make sure that from a financial perspective, I'm not incentivized to, pull my punches a little bit. And I know there are people out there, maybe people listening to this, and they know what I'm saying is true, and people feel it, right? And so that's one aspect. So the aspect that people are afraid of Sony, yeah, like in all the FTC stuff coming out yesterday, it's like clearly Sony's dropping bank, and it's interesting because they don't have to spend as much as Microsoft to do it. If Microsoft were to step up and spend money, they would have to spend more money, and it's just fascinating. Economics of video games are something I'm very interested about. But when it comes down to this, it's like, yeah, like but I don't necessarily think that they're doing that because of Sony, but we know that that happens. We know a lot of these things happen. The other side of this coin that they miss here is that when they start to try and farm various different groups of people around the internet, right? Like, oh, we're going to pander to this group or this idea or this ism out there in order to get that SEO rank. And you see that happen so very much, as long as it's got to be able to reference it. And the point that I'm making here, and I made this months ago, was talking about how they were saying Final Fantasy 16 is too white. It's like, oh, it doesn't feature a wide range of cast of characters. And I'm saying, let them tell the story that they want to make. They're trying to set this in some historical fantasy world, and that is essentially the decision that they made. Not everything is based in American racial, sins of the past. And so there is going to be complexity here. And so I've stated this, multiple times. Final Fantasy 16 will never be woke enough. There's no way that anybody can ever make that case, because as soon as you pander to any specific group or ideal, you're gonna have to go further and further and further. And I just think it's just easier not to engage in that. But we already saw those articles written years ago, and now that also is something I've seen as a narrative popping up, but we're not going to highlight it too much here. Now I want to highlight one more thing: the problem of review scores before we go into the concept of difficulty. Alex tweets out, "Review bombing is so toxic. It used to be that it was only for games that deserved it. Warcraft 2 Reforged. But now it comes as trash as abused and hate on a game for no reason. Sad and pathetic." And at this point in time, the review bomb score was at a 7.1. So the review bombing continues. Here's the interesting thing. Like at a point, let's talk about like it used to be where it was used as a good tool. I can understand that, right? Like these things are tools, as the kind of, in a way, if you think about it, a social technology of a way that we can voice frustration and disappointment at various different things. The problem it ends up is that it gets hijacked by clout, by the clout. I always feel like I want to say that with a German accent. Clout. That was a horrible German accent. I apologize to the Germans out there listening. The aspect here is that now in and of itself, it's just a hijacked technology, and it's interesting because it is twofold. Like, people will say, hey, look at the review scores to like justify this frustration, whether it be a PS5 exclusive, which sucks. It still sucks. Square Enix paid for it. That is stupid. That is disadvantageous to the gamers out there. I'm going to keep saying that. I'm playing it. I'm loving it. I'm going to pick it up on PC when it comes out. But them paying for the game to skip Xbox is a kick in the nuts, and it hurts PlayStation players. And they're going to come into the comments and they're going to defend it. And it's just so like it's what is that, like like where you're a victim of abuse. Like, that's the weird thing about gaming, is it like there's normal, and then like one standard deviation to the left is the you have kind of the relationship honeymoon phase, and then beyond that you end up getting this mindset where people are like, I have to defend this at all costs, right? And that same mindset in terms of defense is the equal but opposite reaction. Scientific aspect here is that people then are like, well, if you're going to defend it, I'm going to attack it mercilessly without logic. And it's the not being able to sit down and have reasonable conversations, I think, is what I find personally frustrating. And that is that social manipulation where in order to be a part of something, you have to then adhere to it. And so when I bring this up, because I've had fascinating conversations that just can't seem to happen in public, where people are afraid to express their opinions because they're afraid of being canceled. And it's interesting because if you think about how social media and the internet has evolved, at first people were afraid of being canceled, but it turns out that only boosted the people getting canceled. Like, that was something where it's like, oh, you get canceled, oh, that's you have a rough 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden the internet rallies around you from the opposite reaction crew, and then they make you their king. All right, cancel me, right? But it's the quiet canceling that is the weird thing. It's that unspoken, that quiet part, that people aren't supposed to say out loud, that people are afraid. That goes back to the Sony thing, that goes back to the quid quo pro. And then so essentially you end up having a lot of people just self-censoring, living these like homogenized lives that just can't even have any form of opinion whatsoever. And it ends up because of people like what we're talking about here to wrap up this video. Story is terrible, combat, pressing the same button 30 times. So Final Fantasy 16 features accessories that make this possible. And if you want to play the game from an accessibility perspective for the story mode, you can do this. There's nothing wrong with it. But the combat system is deep, it's fun, it's engaging. I love just seeking out every opportunity to get into a fight. I like the different enemy types. I love the callbacks to all the styles. But here, you're just watching somebody fight a boss, pressing the same button over and over and over again while eating a sandwich. Doing this, I guess, for the hate, doing this just to be ridiculous. But I've seen people, and I'm not going to highlight them in my comments, like iterate this. Like, hey, this is just a game you press one button and you win. Like, this is ridiculous. So this has the risk of setting in that kind of that zeitgeist. The chance are, though, is that when people get to go hands-on, they'll get to see that, like, oh, these people were either just joking, memeing, or it actually offers way more than people were expecting. The point that I'm making or trying to make here is hopefully an interesting one. When I think about the game and the state of the game, I think one of the things is you have a couple of different forces, kind of in a way coalitions of gamers teaming up with one another. You have the the Sony ponies out, like I guess Xbots or whatever, or even Stadians, as we've learned that games being kept from Stadia was a real interesting thing. So you have that aspect of, okay, we're gonna hate on this game because it is a PS5 exclusive. You have those who, the Final Fantasy, like wanting that traditional like turn-based style. You have let's see here. I'm trying to think. Like I think there's 2 or 3 more. Oh, you have turn-based. We have the Final Fantasy, the mature crowd. Hell, let's just bring back up the review. You have this aspect of just like the game rated M, no real options for accessibility there. In terms of like, if I was going to play this game around my kids, there's not that option. So it is a game that I don't play in front of them. So you have, I think, all these different coalitions. And then you have people who are just bored. They take joy in being a part of these like hate campaigns. And it's weird, especially when it comes to gaming, because like overall, if you go actually look at the Metacritic review scores, if I just bring this up, like this website up on screen, and maybe my editor can go and capture essentially that, you're looking at overall massive positive numbers, but then you have obviously the negative numbers are trying to catch up to drive that further down. But if you just look at the positives are beautifully great, like lots of good things to talk about, lots of beauty in people enjoying this game. But positive doesn't get you the attention that you want sometimes. It's like a kid throwing a temper tantrum. They're just looking for attention, any kind of attention, positive or negative. They just want some attention. And I think a lot of the internet is all about that attention. Anyway, guys, that's it for me. Thanks so much for joining me in today's video. Hopefully you got something good from it. Hopefully you're enjoying the game. And if you're not, hopefully that when it comes to PC, you'll get the opportunity to sit down and play it, or who knows? We'll see what happens with the FTC over the next couple weeks and see if anything develops out of that. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for joining me. Hopefully you have a wonderful day. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video, but until then, take care.